Next question. What is it, Jen?
Okay, I'm going to jump to question number 3, just because this kind of tails off on that. This person's asking, do we have to change the pitch deck based on who we are pitching to? Let's say for an angel who is super technical versus a non-technical one.
Great question. And yes, 1,000 times, Danielle. Like it is absolutely. Again, I'm gonna say I've said it twice already. Communication is the burden of the sender. That means that we have to think about who we are communicating to. We have to do our best job of making that as easy for them to absorb as possible and to get the right reaction out of them. So yes, if you're dealing with a non-technical person going on and on about your database structures and how you guys hack to, they don't care. They're not going to understand. It's going to go over their head. It's going to make them uncomfortable. Last thing we want. Same thing. If you have a very highly technical founder and you gloss over your stack, they're going to go, or a technical investor, they're going to go like, well, I want to know about this, right? I want to understand because this is important to me. Ultimately, it may not be important to the overall outcome of the project, but we're catering to our audience. We always have to. We have to play to the audience. So if they like fiddle music, you got to bust out your fiddle. So thinking about who you're presenting to is super, super important. And make sure that you get as close to that as you can. And this is where like doing background, doing research, looking at who else they've invested in, finding out how they presented if you can is super, super valuable. You know, I know a lot of founders will take the approach like they work endlessly on a pitch deck to come up with some like final perfect version. And then that's just the one that they use. There's no final perfect version unless you're only presenting to one investor, right? So don't get too caught up slides layout, don't get married to the language. And of course, modify. Like if you consistently pitch a particular slide and people lean back and cross their arms or like tip their heads or look at each other, like take that feedback. Like they're not understanding, they're not resonating, they're not catching something there. Make those changes. But in addition to that, do everything you can to understand your audience and make sure that you modify that. And it's going to change from angels, friends and family are going to need to hear it in a very different way. Then angels are going to need to hear it when you get into Series A, B, C, VCs, micro VCs, different than a PE firm. All of this stuff matters.
This question is very common. And my answer is common, like, don't be surprised. Based on what Ryan said, that's the principle. Don't be surprised if you have 10 different pitch decks by the end of the day.
Yep.
And you pull it out. You're going to always have your master pitch deck, but there's that introductory screener deck that goes out in the introduction. Then there's a technical one where you share your stack. All of those things combined. I've even had different pitch decks for different co-founders because sometimes different co-founders present and the decks have been completely different. Same problem, same solution, but the story inside has been different. All those things. So don't be afraid to try all the different versions, test them out. And like I said, don't be surprised if you have multiple versions. Next question. We got one more, Jen?
Yes. The last one we have is from Chris saying, I've heard 20 to 30 words max per slide. Is this a general rule? How about balance of visuals and text in slides?
The number of words per slide, certainly there is a max. Like if it looks like a wall of text, it's a wall of text, right? Nobody wants to look at a wall of text. I just try to go back through and look at it and say like, it's not really about the number of words. Clearly there's a number that's too many. I just go back through and like ask yourself, does this word add anything to this? Is this helping my understanding? Is it adding anything to this? Or is it, and sometimes even hurting the understanding? And so just try to think about how you can strike that balance. There's, and I'm not going to remember who said it now, it may have been Thomas Edison, make a thing as simple as it can be, but not more. We want to make sure that we're trimming fat off the steak and not muscle, right? We don't want to give up any of the, well, I actually like fat and forget it. The steak analogy doesn't hold here. The metaphor was bad. Sorry, guys. We want to cut fat and not muscle, all right? We'll use me as the example. I need to cut some fat. I don't need to cut any muscle. In that case, we want to be clear that like when we're going through and we're deleting things, how does it change the understanding? Just take a couple of those words out, reread it. Like, did the augmentation help anything? Ask other people for feedback, because you cannot have the expectation with investors that I have with my children. My expectation with my children is that they hear what I meant and not what I said, all right? Investors will hear what you said. They're not going to hear what you meant. So make sure that every word on that deck, and just refine and refine and refine. I've realized over time, I cannot write simply. I can simply edit.
Yeah.
Right. And so spend your time editing. I cannot write simple, not the first time. I never get it right the first time. I have to get it out there, and then I edit down and edit down and edit down and edit down, and just make sure that you're not changing the meaning too far. And that's what I meant by hear what I, make sure that you understand what I meant, not what I said. In this case, we don't have that luxury. So we have to make sure that we haven't trimmed away anything that does meaningfully change what people will take away from it. And it is an art and a science. This is where like I love to look to some of our most famous ads, the ad examples that we have. Ads, the best ads you've seen, the ones that you know of, the ones that you remember, those have all done a very, very good job of this. How do we make it visual? How do we make it falsifiable? How do we make it clear and concrete, right? How do we make it something that we can say that nobody else can? When we bake these elements into what we're writing in our decks, we're writing better decks. right? But edit. So many times it's people like they finally figure out what they think they want to say, and then they leave it, and it just doesn't get enough editorial pass and bounce it off people. Like I asked this question in our pitch deck, the session that Will and I do, the public session, pitch deck perfection. One of the questions that I ask is, where are you with your pitch deck? There's a couple choices there. Who has seen your pitch deck, right? I put it out to investors and some of the general public. Only my team, only my mom, right? And very frequently, like, are you kidding? Only my mom, right? And that's because, like, so very often people are working on a deck and they're so worried about perception, they're not letting anybody see it. I'm not suggesting you have to put it out to investors first. Let somebody see it, right? Let your friends look at it and see, do they understand any of this? Now, they're not investors, but they're still rational humans. Well, not all of my friends, but a lot of my friends are. Get feedback.
We try to be
That's
right.
how you'll know when you got this right. And then ask people what they take away from it. Also, one of my new favorite fun, well, not new, but one of my favorite ways of using some of the large language models, we'll just use ChatGPT as the example here. Ask it to react to stuff. Play the role of a super snarky, very pessimistic investor. Read my deck, read this slide. Tell me what you take away from it. Where would you be confused? Where would you be excited? Would this upset you in any way? And just ask it to react. And now it's not perfect, but if you haven't shown it to any other humans, at least find some ways. If you're still afraid to show it to another person, show it to a machine and get some generalized feedback. And it's often very enlightening. Like, what it'll come back with and tell you will clear up some of the misconceptions around the translation between what's in your head and what's on the page.
You know what? I haven't actually done that. That's a good hack. Let me give you another ChatGPT hack for those of you checking this out. I will literally ask ChatGPT, I'll say, put it down in 30 words or less, because ChatGPT tends to kind of bloat things to have it make sense. And then I'll say, is there anything I'm missing from it if you had to add a few more words, or try cutting that down a little more. And ChatGPT is fantastic because it will do comparisons. Like, you can say, give me 3 versions of it and compare, and you'll be able to see it. So doing comparisons and research using ChatGPT to get that reaction, that's a hack that I use. So try it. The other thing I'd like to add is, yes, generally speaking, you can get headline statements down into 30 words or less. And then you add 3 bullet points, you're on the 35 words for the pitch slide, the slide under itself. I have tested it, I've seen it, it works. But when you've got a bio slide and you've got amazing logos that you put, use logos, those visuals, that's social proof. Or you got bullet points, you may need more than 30 words for the bullet points, but don't write a whole biography that someone has to squint and sit there and, curl up by the fire and they go, okay, I'm reading a memoir. So again, going back to what Ryan says, the burden's on you, make it easy for the investor. Great question. I hope this has been helpful.